What is up, Coach Emma here, and welcome back to the Fit Habit Life podcast, where we cut through the noise, talk real health and fitness, sustainable fat loss, and habits that actually work. And today, this is the first podcast where I've had two guests. So it's a very, very exciting day. I have Laura is back again, and no, we're still not roommates, but maybe next time. And Keegan. Keegan is a functional doctor that Laura introduced me to because she works with clients to help address like a variety of different issues to help give their clients the best quality service. And when I did my episode on like what's wrong with functional medicine, Keegan listened to it and Laura shared it with Keegan, and she was like, you got to have Keegan on to talk about how we work together and how like functional doctors can actually do a good job and partner with coaches and collaborate together. So I wanted to have them both on to have this conversation. So welcome back, Laura. Welcome, Keegan.
I'm happy to be back. A little grenade throwing every once in a while has us come together to an episode where we can talk about the flip side of the coin. And I think it'll be beneficial to have both POVs for our audience and your audience to see how like you kind of like presented a lot of the bad side and like what is the good side, and potentially going, hey, where does this fit in the hierarchy of like helping people get healthier?
Yes. So with that, Keegan, how did you get into functional medicine? What is your background?
All right. So I went into pediatric residency after medical school, and then from there went into pediatric critical care. I was solely interested in staying hospital-based and had no desire to be in like any sort of clinic setting. Then as I was there, in the whirlwind of the ICU world, I was seeing a lot of kids who had things that really, if they had been addressed preventatively, would not have ended up in the ICU. Of course, we have traumas and accidents and such that tragically occur. But we had a fair amount of kids that had new onset of type 2 diabetes, so severe that it ended them up in the ICU. We had a lot of severe asthma exacerbations. And those are things that I was, it was like, what's going on here? Like, why can't we help this earlier? I was also really interested in nutrition. During my fellowship time, I did some projects in nutrition in the critically ill, so it had already piqued my interest. And I've always had a baseline background of just being involved in sports and being involved in movement. I did a lot of cycling throughout med school and training, because I didn't have my mountains outside of New Hampshire, so I had to make do with cycling. But I was always interested in kind of that sporty background. So I eventually just was searching around looking for a new research project that I was required to do as an attending. And I stumbled on this course from the Institute of Functional Medicine on functional nutrition. And I was like, all right, free CME. I'll just take this course. It was a 1-hour CME, and it completely flipped the script for me. It was suddenly looking at food as medicine type of deal, which, food is not strictly medicine, of course, but, it was eye-opening. Coming from a very strict conventional background, it was like, wow, these pieces kind of really fall into place. So I started doing some of their other free CME. And, once you open that box of kind of this functional world, you can't close it. And, you start seeing it everywhere. So I got really, really into it and, learning more and just taking more courses, meanwhile still working in the ICU, of course, and eventually decided to make the leap and jump over and say, I want to open up my own practice. So I did, and I left the ICU world, and it was slowly, just accumulated more knowledge and more patience, working both with adults and kids, because, I think, and that stemmed from, working with families. You're not just working with an individual child, you're working with the whole family, right, to change things. I did my training through the Institute of Functional Medicine, and then I did the American College of Lifestyle Medicine for their ABLM certification or board certification. And more recently, I have now finished my obesity medicine boards. So I have that under my belt as well. And it's been a great journey. I was with a practice that was called Index Health that it sadly closed, but now have started a practice called Integrity Health through which Laura and I have been able to work together. So it's really exciting. But yeah, that's been my journey.
That's awesome. What got you into the pediatrics space in the first place, and what were you seeing specifically that really piqued your interest?
So I went to med school thinking I was going to do infectious disease because I was a microbiology nerd in college. But I found that kids smelled the least worst. And so I was drawn to the pediatric world. The biggest piece I think for peds world is if you've in medicine, you'll know that it's essentially a mostly happy place. When it's sad, it is tragically sad, but in general, a pediatric hospital is a happy place. There's murals on the walls everywhere. There's bright colors. There's lots of smiling faces, and I think that was always much more appealing than the adult world. So that's kind of where I was drawn, and that went with it. Looking back, would I do the same thing? I have no idea. To be honest with you, I think there are probably different ways I would go based on, what I've ended up doing, and different learning that I probably would have done. But I have no regrets in that regard. So yeah, it was the kids. And like I said, it was just seeing kind of these really sick kids that had things that probably shouldn't have progressed. And so when I was doing those kind of initial functional medicine courses, I was seeing, wait a second, asthma probably tied to these derangements in the immune system. What are the things that we're doing ahead of time, to help with that? And so now, kind of taking that, we're looking at the microbiome, we're looking at, what is the cup of inflammation that this child is experiencing? Are there contributors like mold, or other toxic insults? We know that there is a genetic component to it, of course, but it's the environment that really turns that genetics on. So what in the environment needs to change, in terms of food exposures or toxin exposures, et cetera, working on that microbiome and that immune system balance. So when I started putting all that together, that's, it fit, it matched. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I actually had asthma growing up, and I was born through C-section. So I think that contributed. But then I was also really picky, and I ate a bunch of crap, and I wouldn't eat like fruits and vegetables and protein. I didn't like hamburger meat, like any beef. I wouldn't eat beef for like 12 years. So that's probably part of it. But
yeah, and all of it. It's probably all of that contributes to that microbiome development. And I'm sure we could do whole episodes just on that. But one of the things that's problematic with, just straight conventional medicine is that we're constantly looking for what's the one thing, right? Like you see this study that looks at, okay, were they C-section or not C-section? And that's, the cutoff, but we can't look at it in isolation because I think there are plenty of people out there thriving that were C-section that didn't develop asthma. So what are the other pieces to that in the environment that change that? Okay, what was our nutrition like, which is going to impact our microbiome, which is going to impact our immune system? What were the exposures around the cigarette smoke? So I think all of those pieces as well add up, and I think that really, I think, is the big difference between conventional and functional viewpoints is just looking at the bigger picture. And I am thankfully seeing that shift in terms of my conventional colleagues too, of recognizing that there are many more contributors. And we move slowly, right? Because, you have generations to work through of changing that knowledge. Knowledge is very slow to change in medicine as people get into their ways and they're like, this is what I was taught, so this is what's true, even though things, there are cells that we've discovered in the body that didn't exist when I was in training. And so
Wow.
I have to shift that learning. And if we're not on top of that and we're not proactive about that, we are going to get stuck in those older viewpoints. And that's what I think a lot of people see too. And they get really frustrated with, and they're like, well, conventional medicine's crap because, they're just focused on this one thing. And I think it's not truly like that, but we are working through generations of change to get there.
Yeah, and it takes way longer to update textbooks
Yeah.
and schooling, right? Because the school system, it's so long. So
Uh-huh.
it takes a long time to update all of that process. And it's like, if someone's cutting me open, I do want them in school for like 10 years, So,
Amen.
yeah. So it's like they should go through a rigorous process like that. And they shouldn't just take anecdotal evidence. They should have like a founding in some like study and science and like practical like application, like it actually worked and there's data to show that before updating all of that. But yeah, it's cool to see the shift. And I think like I live in Utah and there's a lot of younger doctors. I don't know why, but like I go to the dermatologist and the guy looks like he's 20. He can't be 20, but he looks
But he's
like
in dermatology, so his skin routine is top notch.
Yes. And it was funny because so I used to have terrible acne, right? Because of diet, I would not eat meat and I was very particular and right. So that really affected my gut microbiome, which affected my skin. And then I was going to the dermatologist and and I was like, yeah, I used to have really bad acne. He's like, oh, wow, how did you fix it? Like he was genuinely curious. And I was like, oh, I just stopped eating crap. And he's like, oh. I'm like, yeah. But it's cool because he was like actually interested in like trying to figure out other ways to help his clients. Whereas in the past, I hadn't seen that. Like a lot of doctors would be like, like, why do you believe that junk or whatever, like how.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
Yeah.
I definitely see a bit of a shift.
The shift is definitely happening. It's just slow.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you transition from like normal conventional doctor to like more integrative, like functional, like full big picture sort of doctor?
I actually made the shift about 6 years ago. I was because it was COVID. Actually, and that was not intentional. I had put in my notice to my ICU job about 3 months before that.
Wow.
So it would definitely, it just, the timing fell that it was all of a sudden COVID. I moved, in with my husband. He's Navy, former Navy, and we had been separated for far too long at that point, because of different deployments and such. And it was kind of like, this needs to happen. So it was leaving that job, finally getting to see my husband again, which, let me tell you, moving in together at the time of COVID when you haven't been living together is a whole nother,
Yeah.
a whole nother thing, but it's worked out.
Good.
But yeah, so that was the timing, which is just kind of ironic, but it was good because everybody was already switching over to virtual. So I think that setting really helped because I knew I didn't want to start a brick and mortar, because of the Navy thing. We knew that where we were was not going to be our final landing place at all. So I was hesitant to build up any sort of brick and mortar just to know that I was going to leave in a couple of years. So virtual really was more ideal. So it really helped that everybody kind of was making the shift at the same time anyway. So I try to look at that as one of the few positives of the COVID time period.
Nice. Well, that worked out.
Yeah.
And where do you like service clients?
So I service clients wherever I am licensed. I now have 11 or 12 licenses, most on the
nice.
East Coast, but I do have Colorado, Texas, and so I do have some out west, but most on the East Coast there. I'm based now in New Hampshire. This is home. We finally got to move back here a couple years ago, so that's where I'm officially based. But yeah, I do have multiple licenses.
That's awesome. That's great. Are you planning on trying to get all 50 states?
No, because one thing I have always, and I tell this to Laura all the time, I'm so envious of the lack of regulation around the coaching world, because I must have a license for every state that I see a patient in. So it's wherever the patient is located. I have to have a license there. And all the COVID, emergency exemptions have all been lifted for quite a while. So there's none of that anymore. For me to have that license, I have to pay a couple $100 a year at least per license. Each year, I have to maintain certain amounts of CME, which is decided individually by the states each year. And I have to keep track of all of that. So, I'm not a spreadsheet queen like Laura. So I use a CE broker for mine, but I do have to keep track of all that. And so the expense is a lot. So I actually, in my practice, I don't do any controlled medications, because you have to have an individual DEA for each state as well, which is even more money. So yeah, I'm not aiming for all 50 states.
Okay, that's fair. That makes sense. Yeah, because for coaching, like I could coach somebody in a different country. Mm-hmm. And it's like not even a problem. Yep. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that's a good clarification point, because sometimes what's unfortunate is, like, even though Keegan and I work together with a lot of clients, it depends on if they live where she can service them in a way that makes sense. And the good news is I do ask Keegan for referrals from other states that my clients are in that she doesn't have a license in. But as we think of one of those big differentiators, like maintaining licensure costs money, then those CEUs don't necessarily all, the ones that are good for Texas may not be good for New Hampshire, and vice versa. And so it's not just, I have to do a certain amount of units. I might have to do double the amount of units just to make sure I have coverage across the places I have licensure in. And I'm just speaking for you, Keegan, on that. You're nodding, so I'm assuming that I'm saying that.
You're spot on.
Yes.
You're spot on.
And so for my clients who, Keegan comes on and we do some like educational chats about every 6 to 8 weeks or so. And like, I want to work with her. Like, I need help. And it's like, you're not in her state, and like until there's enough, like the barrier is not as high as it is, which we do want a barrier in some respects, and we don't. Like there's like good things, as we kind of chatted about offline before this, where we want to make sure that we're holding the people who are providing us medical care to like the standard that we know that we're not getting, making sure that we're getting the care that we're asking for. But at the same time, it does create a barrier to getting quality service depending on where you live, which is unfortunate as well.
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. That's good to know. Because, so I partner with a company that does like HRT and functional medicine and stuff. And they do have all 50 states. So I'm like, man, that's a lot.
That is a lot. That is a lot. If you're a big enough practice, you can usually afford it. But I'm a pretty small practice though. And I don't know how many physicians they have on staff. It may not be like everybody has all 50, but rather, we've divided it up there.
That might be the case. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is your practice just yourself, or do you have anybody else on your team?
I do. I have 2 other partners, Dr. Matthew Taylor, who is based out of Michigan. And we have a couple overlapping licenses, and then he has a couple that I don't have. So that expands us a little bit. And then we do have a dietitian as a partner, Stacy Seslowski, who is fabulous. And so she similarly has restrictions, but in the nutrition world, it's a lot more lax. So there's a lot more overlap. There's a fair amount of, if I have a license at all, I can do this, or if you have it in this state, it also applies to that state type of thing. So thankfully, she didn't have to go get individual ones for all the states that Matthew and I have. But there's definitely still some regulation.
That makes sense. Yeah. The distinguishing between like dietitian, nutritionist, nutrition coach, and that's all a big mess.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
I
it
think
is. Yeah, it is.
That's a good, Keegan. Maybe you can dig into. I met Stacey. She's awesome. And not every person that Keegan works with comes to me. A lot of them work with Stacey for very important reasons. And so I think, Keegan, from your perspective as like a functional provider, like how do you decide like who needs to go to Stacey versus who might be a good fit for nutrition coaching? Like where are they at in their journey when you're figuring that piece out to go like, how do I have the best care partner for this patient?
Yeah. So with Stacey can be having that dietitian license gives her the capacity to, quote unquote, prescribe medical diets. And so she can say, yes, you should be keto. I'll never hear those words out of her mouth, but she can say that. Primarily we follow similar, overviews about whole food, plant forward type stuff. But anyway, so she has that capacity. And so she's really good with helping people build their plate. And everybody that comes through our practice does need to see her. And it's a mandatory piece, but she's not a coach. And so that kind of more of that hand holding and working through, she definitely hits a lot of what Laura has hit in terms of recommending the lifestyle, she's big on vagal nerve support. That's one of her passions, as it should be. She sometimes reminds me when I forget, to bring it up. So, she's really good about that. But, so she talks about those pieces. She talks about sleep. But it's more of the, let's help you work through those barriers. That's where the coaching aspect becomes really, really helpful there. And, there are people that have zero desire to do any sort of tracking. So certainly would not be a fit with Laura. So I don't make those recommendations. But there are, and so Stacey works through portion sizes, but that touch point thing that you had mentioned in your earlier podcast, that is not as frequent, or just not, our practice isn't set up like that. And so I think that's a difference there.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And as a nutrition coach, so Utah's weird and Utah doesn't have rules on this, which I think is a problem. There's a lot of really crappy coaches here, but usually a nutrition coach is not allowed to prescribe a meal plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's state by state regulation, because I looked it up because I was curious. Yeah. I'm like, why is somebody giving you a meal plan? Oh, you're actually allowed to in Utah, and you don't need any sort of licensure or anything to do that. So like a Joe Schmo from the street could just give you a meal plan. Utah's interesting.
Yeah.
But usually you need a license and you need to be a dietitian, right, to prescribe a meal plan specifically for specific conditions, right?
Yeah. So that's Stacey's role. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. And so what does your practice kind of look like? When you're getting a client, how do you onboard them? And what are next steps? How do they end up working with Laura, and how do you guys end up partnering together?
So we have a fabulous admin who does our discovery calls, and so people can learn more about the practice, more about pricing, those kind of things, and what it will look like there in their journey. Then we do a foundational visit, and that is an hour with myself and an hour with Stacey, or with Dr. Taylor and Stacey. and not necessarily back to back, but an hour each. And so we'll go through, I'll get into all the nitty gritty of their history and their medical exposures and childhood and all the things. Stacy's visit is actually going to have a fair amount of overlap in that. She talks about, what are trials and tribulations that you've run through. Yes, it's more with the nutrition spin, but it's amazing how much we have people tell us one thing and the other person another thing, or they suddenly have, a recollection about something that they forgot to tell me. It's incredible how often that happens. Which is fine. That helps with the team, the team-based approach for that. So it works. But yeah, and so from that, Stacy's able to create that meal plan recommendation and set them up with that. I will, set up their testing and such. And then we have a membership-based practice. So they kind of choose a level of membership based on the intensity of being seen. And that's either monthly or every other month. But then we also have a kind of a single appointment, basic level meant for people that have been seen by us for, a while and are moving more into that maintenance stage. So we have a couple kind of different variations of how often people are seen. But usually it's kind of equivocal between visits with myself and then visits with Stacy. And so when I've been working with certain folks, and it's very clear that they have goals around body composition or weight optimization, or just needing more intense nutritional support, then that's where I call on Laura there. And so, unfortunately, the number of times I've recommended Laura has not translated into the number of times Laura has seen one of my patients. And I mean, a lot of that's cost, of course. My practice is fully cash-based. We're out of network of any new insurance. So that's, one of those things. It's kind of deciding which one they can do. Sometimes I recommend, hey, let's go work with her, and I can just see you at irregular intervals, and and let's do that. So I wish it was more frequent and that we could just streamline it, but unfortunately that's the state we're in.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would get you to send someone to Laura? So body composition changes specifically, or is there any triggers that you're like, this person needs that extra level of support or needs something else? That's exactly it. So if I'm seeing somebody and it's very clear that they need a lot more hand holding, they need, a frequent weekly or biweekly touch point, then that's where I'm gonna put their time, or recommend their time, to see Laura. So, I think it varies. I don't think I've sent anybody to say, just working on sleep or something like that, isolated. That's usually nutritionally based. And maybe it is just that they're trying to get themselves on track, holistically, and not necessarily that they have body composition goals or weight goals or anything like that. I am constantly recommending her exercise programs, the TPA. I don't know how that's translated. We have no way to track that, but it's in 75% of my recommendations. Basically, if someone's not already following a strength program, I'm like, here's some good ones for you. So there's that piece too. So it varies, but what if you had to break it down to the most nitty gritty, it's those that need that most frequent touch point there. Because like I said, my practice is not set up like that. I mean, if people are willing to pay for that type of frequency, then certainly we could do that. But I think it gets expensive when you think about the time spent. And so that might be something you get into in terms of thinking through the team-based approach. But that's where, I'm kind of thinking for those referrals. Yeah, so, that makes a lot of sense. Sorry, go for it.
No, you're good. I just got some thoughts thinking. And thoughts thinking, yikes. But Keegan, as you're kind of having that person come in, on your perspective, some of the prescriptions that you're giving really do take 6 to 8 weeks to come about. And so when you're trying to approach how do I do patient care, sometimes that's like, hey, a monthly touch point is the right amount because it is going to take time for these protocols to take effect. I say that with firsthand knowledge of having done some of these protocols a couple times. I was like, okay, well, see what it does for 6 weeks, like actually do the protocol. And then I sometimes message you and be like, I traveled and I forgot everything and I got to start over again. But when we think about for you of going, how do I make the most for this patient? You're like, the best thing I can do is like, I don't have a lot to say until we can actually see this protocol through. And so sometimes there's just a mismatch and like, look, it is not, you don't want to pay to see me every 2 weeks because we don't have things to like kind of chat about. And I want to make this the best like time value to money for you so that you can get the entire protocol without having to pay the price point that requires that amount of face time. And then Stacey does an incredible job with like teaching people how to eat from that big like holistic view perspective. And so I think, Emma, as hearing Keegan talking about this is the client that usually comes to me from Keegan is a little bit more motivated, a little bit more like, I have these big goals and I'm willing to do some of this like things that I think are weird. Maybe I haven't tracked my food before, but like Keegan says that if I want to do this, or like a couple perhaps there are people who are looking for peptides and she's like, hey, like, have you tracked your food yet? Have you tried to do these things? Why don't you like work with Laura for a little while before we potentially go down this road, and it'll save you a lot of money in the long term from a prescription, potentially if you learn some foundational skills that may or may not be the most applicable thing for where you're at right now. So when I think about like that piece, it's like, how do you find that how do we get the best outcome for the patient based on what they're willing to do and like what their time and like ability to, money is finite. We do not have unlimited amounts of it. And so for the people who can, or have that ability to, come join a cohort or come work one-on-one, it's a great fit. And for a lot of people, they don't need that level to get from where they're at to where they want to go either too. So it's just the right niche, the patients who have the oomph to want to do the things, and then the resources to also want to do those things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like that you recommend Laura before peptides because...
Oh, yes.
Oh, man. Like, also in Utah, people love peptides. Like, everybody and their mom is on some sort of peptide or whatever. And I'm looking at them. I'm like, you're not lifting weights. You're not sleeping. You're not managing your stress. And you're not eating enough or right for your goals. So that's refreshing because same with like and I guess, well, I'm not going to talk for medical doctors. In the functional medicine space, there's a lot of companies that make a lot of money off of peptides. And so they will sell you a bunch of peptides with your HRT protocol that you don't need because it makes them more money.
Yep.
And so that's
really
very
unfortunate.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And and part of it is in a small, very tiny realm, I understand some of it in that, what we do is being outside of the insurance world and inside the insurance world, regardless. These are not lucrative practices. Anybody that gives you that opinion is probably got a lot of those side things going, charging for supplements, charging for peptides, overcharging for testing. We don't do that in my practice because one, I think it's an integrity issue. But also like, I don't want that to influence how I recommend things. at all. And in fact, you'll find that I don't recommend peptides a lot of the time. I think peptides personally are, the sprinkles on top of the ice cream, not even the cherry, not heavy enough for the cherry, but just some sprinkles atop the ice cream instead of, all of those foundational things. And I don't think they work as well unless you're doing all those other foundational things in most settings. Now, I will say my partner, Matthew Taylor, is brilliant when it comes to peptide use and the intricacies of that. He's probably easily one of the smartest physicians I've ever worked with. And I don't have those smarts. But that said, I've also not, seen those peptides work when, again, you're not sleeping, you're not eating right, you're not, lifting the weights. Like, peptides are not magic. They're supportive to a degree, but there's also a realm that we don't know. And people are using these peptides that at most have animal trials in them. And we're seeing that doesn't even translate. There was something just recently that, not peptide related, but that we learned the way red blood cells mature is different than we thought, because what we had thought was based on mouse models. So we're talking decades and decades of knowledge was based on mouse models. And it turns out in the actual human body doesn't actually happen like that. So the way we've been treating certain conditions around those red blood cells may not be the way we actually should be treating them. And that this is going to be a game changer for some different like red blood cell disorders like myelodysplastic syndromes and such. So like, if that's the case with peptides, and there's a very good chance that it is for at least some of them, what are they actually doing in this human body long term with these use? So I have a lot of hesitancy, with that knowledge for those peptides that have not been used within humans in the past, and that we don't have that evidence there. So, I understand your concern there, because we could go on. That's a whole nother podcast about peptides.
Yeah, and like we were talking about before, I don't know if we touched on this, like functional health coaches. But there are some that will like refer like peptides to clients and like send them the research chemical, like it's like that's not right. Like,
no,
that's
it's not
within scope.
No, it's not.
That's not. Yeah, that's wrong.
You can almost guarantee that they're not receiving full informed consent about the lack of human data, and that we don't know that this isn't going to cause cancer for you later on. So I think that's irresponsible personally, but.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
I mean, Emma, I think that is like, we've asked Keegan a lot about how she refers to us as coaches, but I think it's also important for us to go like, hey, like, when does it make sense for us to go like, this is way out of scope? And like, for me, it's when I have a client come out, like, there are a lot of times where they're like, I have some GI issues. I have all these things. Like, well, let's optimize, like, what do we know, right? Like, we know about lifestyle things, we know about training, we know about like sleep, and like, how does nutrition play in those? And for me, if I have anybody who comes in like, okay, I'm still having all this bloating, GI distress, and they came in maybe with a really shit diet, like I'm seeing Taco Bell every day, no fiber, all these things. Like, well, we probably can make some things better if we just optimize how we're eating, when we're eating it, composition, etc. But if I get to a point where I'm like, okay, we've done a lot of these things, and you're having some weird symptoms that don't necessarily align with what I know about lifestyle nutrition, and we have optimized these in a good spot, like, it's probably time for you to go see somebody else. Because if you go to Keegan, when you start out, Keegan might tell you to like, hey, we can do some tests, but if you're eating Taco Bell 3 times a day, like, that's probably the problem before we can identify these things. And so for me, when I start getting clients who are having, especially like GI issues that I'm like, this doesn't make a lot of sense based on like everything that I know about you. I've talked to you in depth and 30 minutes a week, every week for months. And like, this doesn't, or, some things that are lots of irregular sleep disruptions, things that are like, we've optimized a lifestyle to what is a reasonable level, and sleep is disrupted, GI issues, your hormonal things are like just if we're having some weird symptoms around our cycles or regular cycles, like that's when I'm like, okay, cool. Like, hey, we have done what we can do here. I need you to go to see Keegan because I can't help you any further on this realm. And I'll do the same thing. We're like, okay, hey, why don't we drop down to maybe some emails or once a month phone calls so that you can work with her because we've run our route and you've come so far. And the same way, like trying to be symbiotic and like, how do I make sure that this person's in good hands? Because at that point, I'm not going to refer them to some sort of black gray market research peptides. I'm like, this is our scope. Like, here's or sometimes they'll come back and be like, hey, can you look at my blood work? I've had many clients send me there and I'm like, hey, I can visually put my eyes on this, but personally, I don't read blood work. They might come back and be like, well, my creat, should I be worried about my kidney, my creatinine inside? I'm like, well, maybe just ask your doctor about like, hey, you worked out really, did leg day an hour before you went to get your blood draw. Can you just tell them that and see what they say? And then if they're, or they're just like, my doctor said these are fine. I'm like, well, I mean, like normal, but like Keegan has come and done some blood work conversations for our clients. I'm like, yeah, I know it says in range, but that's not normal. So maybe you need to go see somebody who's going to give you a much bigger picture here. Because I'm not going to give them any RX off of their blood work, but I will be like, hey, we did this call. Here's the reference ranges that she provided that are actually healthy ranges, not just normal ranges. And here's a little red flag for you to go take it back to your doctor. And if your doctor's not going to listen to you, it's time to go like find somebody else who's going to listen to you.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we should do. Like I will say, like I do look at blood work, but I don't recommend, like I don't diagnose. I just like it can be useful, like for specific clients to know, like, hey, like maybe there's something else going on. And basically, my goal is to figure out what might be the problem, but not try to diagnose it, but say, hey, like I think there's this problem. Go talk to this person who I know and trust that can help you address it. But also to make sure, because I've had clients that have been sold crazy protocols and other things and put through the ringer with functional doctors that's why I want to be able to understand from my lens, like what could be happening so that way they don't get screwed over.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. The functional medicine world is the wild, wild west. And we were talking about that a little bit before the call. And, there's no strict regulation around things. Everybody has their own protocol. And I hate that word personally because, it is such a personalized piece, which is also why we don't have, major guidelines out there, is because we've recognized how individualized care needs to be. In fact, if anybody's interested in Alzheimer's, there's a fabulous study. They had done the initial pilot, and then this year they released a follow-up study to that. In what they did is they took people and they put them on these personalized care plans. So maybe you needed more gut health, maybe you needed more hormone optimization, et cetera, et cetera. And they're all older individuals with cognitive decline and or actual Alzheimer's, and have had fabulous results in terms of individualizing, personalizing that. So that's partly why, it is more apt to the Wild West and that it is so personalized. But then there are way too many cowboys, way too many cowboys out there doing that. So it is. I fully hear you on like not wanting people to go. It happens to me all the time. I did a discovery session with somebody 2 weeks ago, and they had paid out something like $5,000-$6,000 working on this protocol with a physician. And I was like, I'm sorry. I'm apologizing for them that they were put through this and they don't feel any better. And I think that's tragic. And I also think that's a sin. And unfortunately, I don't see that going away either.
Because they capitalize, like these people are desperate. They're willing to do anything depending on the situation. Like me and the mold, we got screwed over by the mold remediators. We got way overcharged, but they're the well-known people in the space. They break all the stuff to get the black mold out, but they don't fix anything, and they charge double what a normal like restoration company would. but they're the mold people in the state
Right.
and we're desperate. So we'll pay it. And then we find out later. It's kind of the same thing. There's a lot of like kind of people preying on insecurities.
Absolutely.
And it's terrible. I had a client who paid like 10 grand for a mold protocol and she didn't even have mold toxicity. They never even ran a mycotoxin test of any kind. I'm like, and she didn't even feel better. And it was like some weird random stuff that the functional doctor like put her on that wasn't even founded in any sort of science.
No, it's just wrong. It's so wrong. You're hitting on a major pain point for me, Emma. And I feel so bad for my patients when they come to me and they're like, I'm desperate because I was desperate. Like it just got worse and I don't feel any better and things are going all awry. And that is 1,000% not my goal with any patient. And I'm sure, I could be sitting off in a much better, vacationing, every other week if I really wanted to be one of those grifters. But I have moral integrity, so I can't do that. But there are people that don't, and they're predators. It's in every industry. We know that.
Yeah,
but,
coaching too, for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm glad that there are doctors like you out there. And the fact that you have like a dietitian that you make your clients meet with, that is huge, because that's what my biggest gripe with a lot of functional doctors are. It's like they don't, and I've gone to one. She was pretty good. We had like a pretty thorough session, but she didn't really dig in too much to my diet and training. And so it's like those two things are so important. And obviously, like, she doesn't have the background on that, so she wouldn't probably know what to ask or what to dig into. But it's so important, especially like I think 90% of the population is like metabolically unhealthy in some.
Yep.
Right.
88%. Yeah, I think was the quote. And that's an old quote. I'm sure it's worse now.
And so, why do you think diet? Like, how many my town is tiny. We have all the fast foods, like all of them. You could like list them off. I'm like, yeah, we got that one. And they always have lines around the corner. I'm going to the gym in the morning and I every time I almost get hit by somebody trying to get McDonald's before they go to work. And it's like, well,
yeah. It reminds me of when where I lived in North Carolina. That was identical. I do not have that now. In fact, there are no fast food in my town.
That's great.
There's also
jealous.
no stoplights. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, if we don't know of it, we can't ask it. And I think that's something that still needs to change. And I do see it shifting. I mean, there's medical school curricula that are changing now to include nutrition more foundationally and athletics. I mean, or the sports piece of it, things are definitely increasing as well. So we're seeing a big shift there. So that's encouraging. But I'm known in my circle for approaching things like low energy availability and red S and, how are we fueling? Because it's a passion project for me, but at the same time, it's so unknown, completely unknown. So I'm constantly, people are doing these massive medical workups, and I'm like, what are they eating? How are they fueling themselves throughout the day? And it's kind of like light bulb moments. So I love teaching my colleagues about that, but it's still something that's highly under-recognized. So it's getting the word out there is I guess the best we can do right now. And I think there are some brilliant people trying to do that. But until you have that, inkling that you should be asking about it, we're in that situation of that it doesn't get asked. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And I'm glad that you're trying to educate your other coworkers, or I guess colleagues in the space.
Yeah.
Because that's huge. And I think that's how the shift happens, right? It's like one person at a time, trying to communicate all of that. Because yeah, again, like a lot of women, like menopausal women, like yeah, hormones shifting, changing, whatever, but also you've been chronically dieting for like 40 years. So it's like, why do you have low energy and poor sleep? It's like, well, you're not eating any carbs at all. So that's part of the problem. And no carbs, no fiber, GI issues, like, so it's like, if we looked in there, maybe we probably wouldn't need to put them on as much HRT recommendations if that is necessary, or even, maybe not even any extra supplements.
Yeah, I think that's where you're going to win on that one, is the supplements. The hormone argument, I think, is a little different in there, but absolutely. I mean, okay, maybe we don't need to put you on this B complex and this D and this zinc and copper if maybe we fix that nutritional input of where it's coming from, and get the whole food approach in there. So yeah, absolutely. Maybe you won't need, if you're actually, creating satiety throughout the day, that you can actually sleep, that you don't need the magnesium, L-theanine, you name it, magnolia bark extract to sleep through the night, because now you've been fueled. I'm not saying that's 100% across the board, of course, but absolutely.
Yeah, it makes a huge impact. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to
certainly
share your side and what you guys are doing, because it's cool to see. Because I can say I don't think there's maybe like one or two other functional doctors I've seen do things in your kind of way, and it should be a lot more.
It absolutely should. Absolutely should.
Yeah. So what would you like to leave the audience with, Keegan?
There are those of us out there that are taking that approach, but overall, I'm a huge fan of the team-based approach to care. And I think when you're looking for a new doctor, whether that's functional or not functional, and I was saying this to you earlier, Emma, I don't love the term functional. I mean, I think it should just be medicine and the components that support that, which are the foundations of lifestyle. But when you're looking for a new doc, making sure, look through their credentials and that they have real credentials, not a bunch of quote unquote courses that are, one-off type things necessarily, but that they've had the credentials, but they also have a team-based approach, so that you're going to have the resources as you're going to see someone that are going to be able to help you. And so that's my recommendation when people are slowly absolutely seeking out reviews. And, if they have, some sort of discovery session, take advantage of that and nitpick with them. How do you approach this? How do you look at that? Do you take into account my sleep or my nutrition, or what's your viewpoint on nutrition? And if they are, this is the warning flag. If they're like, oh, well, everybody should be intermittent fasting, or everybody should be keto, or everybody should be this, that's a red flag, and run the other direction. Because one, it should be personalized, and two, there really shouldn't be any zealous, behavior around particular things that aren't, the true foundation. So, yeah.
Yeah, love that. I think that's super important too. So that's a great way to leave our audience. So where can our audience find you if they are in one of the states that you provide for?
Okay. So if I can remember all my states. So I am in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, Colorado, and Ohio. I think I got them all.
Georgia?
Georgia. Thank you. See, that's why I have Laura. And we are online. It's Tegrity Health. So integrity without the in, a play on words of sorts. And we're online. We're on all the socials. We have a little YouTube channel. You can see we do host an AMA once a month. That's a new offering for us, but do feel free to join us. Our next one's July 28th. If anybody and everybody can come and watch and submit questions, and we really like those sessions and hope to build them up because, just like to touch base with people and help, get some of these questions that come up and hopefully either help or squash rumors, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's where you can find us.
Awesome. And you'll just send me those after
Absolutely.
we get off, and I'll put them in the show notes. They can find those links there. Cool. Well, thank you guys both for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it was great. We'll for sure do this again. Definitely want to dig into the peptides and the functional testing, which we talked about before. And I forgot what was the other thing. I don't know. There was definitely something else too. So we can have a couple.
It's great. Sign me up.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. If this episode was at all helpful or kind of shattered your paradigm, please share it and get this out to the masses, because functional medicine can be tremendously helpful, but it needs to be done the right way. And so the more people that hear this, the more people will see potentially if they're not being serviced well by their provider, and be able to find and reach out to somebody who is. So yes, catch you guys on the next one, and please share the episode.